What Miller didn't know was that this one piece of trash from a petty theft was about to unravel a secret that had haunted his town, his own family, for decades. This wasn't just a clue to a stolen mower, it was the key to a cold case murder.
Blood on the grass won't wash away. Undetected footprints hidden in the mud.
For Detective James Miller, it was shaping up to be just another Tuesday in the quiet town of Northwood. A stolen lawnmower, an annoyed homeowner, the kind of small town problem that barely makes a ripple. He went about his work with methodical patience, dusting for prints he knew weren't there and logging evidence that would probably lead nowhere. One of those items was a half empty can of soda left behind on a workbench. It was a long shot, but procedure was procedure. What Miller didn't know was that this one piece of trash from a petty theft was about to unravel a secret, his own family, for decades. This wasn't just a clue to a stolen mower, it was the key to a cold case murder. And the killer's greatest shield, his own family's DNA, was about to become the very thing that would bring him down. To really get the impact of that soda can, you have to go back 30 years to 1996. Northwood was a different place then, but it was just as quiet. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where kids played outside until the streetlights flickered on, and at the heart of that idyllic picture was Sarah Jenkins. At 18, Sarah was the town's golden girl. She was bright, kind, and a straight A student with a scholarship to the state university just waiting for her. She worked part time at the local diner, and her family was practically a town landmark. On a crisp October evening, Sarah finished her shift and started her short walk home. She never made it. The next morning, a search party found her in the woods bordering the town park. The discovery didn't just break hearts, it shattered Northwood's illusion of safety. The investigation was immediate and intense. The town, gripped by a mix of fear and anger, demanded answers. Detectives from 3 counties descended on the small community, interviewing everyone and chasing down every rumor. They found a tiny amount of the killer's DNA at the scene, a miracle for forensics at the time. But 1990s technology had its limits. The sample was too degraded to create a full profile, leaving with them a frustrating, useless fragment. It couldn't be matched to anyone. With no witness, no murder weapon, and no viable DNA, every lead just fizzled out. Eventually, the out of town detectives packed up. The national news moved on, and the case went cold, leaving a permanent scar on the heart of Northwood. Nearly 3 decades passed for the town of Northwood. Sarah Jenkins became a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered to teenagers who wandered too close to the woods after dark. Her case file, thick with old reports and dead ends, was moved to a dusty shelf in the archives, a symbol of the town's collective failure. For Sarah's parents, though, the years did nothing to ease the pain. They stayed in the same small house, a living memory, a living memorial to the daughter they'd lost. They pleaded with every new police chief to keep the case open, holding on to the slimmest sliver of hope. But with no new evidence, what could be done? The silence around Sarah's murder was deafening, a constant reminder that her killer was still out there, walking free, maybe even living among them. The town had tried to move on, but for the Jenkins family and for justice, time had stood still. Now, fast forward to 2026. Detective James Miller is standing in a cluttered garage, listening to a homeowner list off a stolen lawnmower and a few power tools. Miller was a Northwood native, a cop who joined the force hoping to make a difference in the town that raised him. Most days that meant dealing with neighborly disputes and the occasional burglary. He was diligent, a real by the hook, a real by the book guy, which was respected by not exactly celebrated in a town that hadn't seen serious crime in years. He scanned the garage and his eyes landed on a soda can beaded with condensation. It was sitting on the workbench right next to where the stolen tools used to be. The homeowner confirmed it wasn't his. Honestly, for a simple burglary, collecting the can for DNA felt like a waste of resources. The lab was backed up, and the chances of getting a hit on a petty thief were next to zero. But Miller was thorough. He carefully bagged the can, logged it as evidence, and sent it off to the state crime lab. It was a moment of pure routine, an act he'd probably performed 100 times. It was also what some cops might call lotto level good luck. A simple act of doing his job that would accidentally set a collision course with the past. Weeks later, Miller had almost forgotten about the soda can when a call came from the crime lab. Just as he expected, the DNA they pulled from the can didn't match anyone in the criminal database for the burglar. But the lab had a new protocol. All unidentified DNA samples were now automatically cross referenced with a national database for cold case evidence, all thanks to a revolutionary new tool: investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. The way it works is both simple and brilliant. Think of how commercial ancestry websites have helped find distant cousins. IgG uses a suspect's DNA to find their relatives in a public genealogy database. By building a family tree from these relatives, investigators can zero in on their suspect. This is the same incredible technology that famously caught the Golden State Killer after 40 years of terror. When the lab ran the soda can DNA through the system, an alert flashed on the screen. It wasn't a direct match to a killer, it was something far more significant: familial match. The DNA from the homeowner theft in Northwood showed a strong genetic link to the partial DNA profile recovered from Sarah Jenkins' murder back in 1996. For the first time in 30 years, the case wasn't just cold, it was burning hot. The ghost that haunted Northwood finally had a new lead, and it came from a can of soda. Settling the burglary was ancient history. A new high priority investigation exploded into life. This time with a team of genetic genealogists in the lead, they took the thief's full DNA profile and started the painstaking work of building out a massive family tree. They traced ancestral lines back to the 19th century and then brought them forward again, identifying hundreds of distant cousins and mapping how they were all connected. The genealogists were looking for an intersection point, the place where different family branches would converge and point to a pool of potential suspects for the 1996 murder. As the tree took shape, a chilling pattern began to form. The branches all seemed to lead back to one place, Northwood. The genetic lines were pointing to a single, well known local family. Detective James Miller was called into his captain's office. On the table was a complex chart, a web of names and dates. His captain pointed to one name on that chart. The DNA from the soda can, the DNA of the petty thief, belonged to Miller's own 16-year-old cousin. Miller stared in disbelief as the captain then traced the lines up to the generation before. The analysis had narrowed the pool of suspects for Sarah Jenkins' murder down to a small group of male relatives who would have been in their late teens or early 20s back in 1996. And on that list was a name that made the blood run cold in Miller's veins: his uncle Robert Miller. The quiet, gentle man who had taught him how to fish, the man who was a constant, steady presence at every family gathering. In an instant, Detective Miller wasn't just an investigator anymore. He was a nephew staring at an impossible choice, and the prime suspect in his town's most infamous murder was his own blood. The weight of that discovery was crushing. Miller was facing a conflict that tore him in two: his loyalty to his family versus his oath as a cop. In a small town, the good old boy network often protects its own, and the pressure to just look the other way to bury this horrifying secret was a real temptation. But when he looked at the faded photograph of Sarah Jenkins pinned to the cold case board, he knew what he had to do. He moved forward with the investigation, his heart heavy with every single step. He couldn't just request his uncle's DNA without blowing the case wide open to his entire family. So he had to get creative. During a family barbecue a week later, he watched his uncle toss a used coffee cup into the trash. After the party ended and everyone was gone, Miller quietly went back, retrieved the cup, bagged it, and sent it to the lab under a different case number. The results came back in less than 24 hours. It was a perfect match. The DNA on the cup from Robert Miller was a direct match to the degraded sample found on Sarah Jenkins' body 30 years ago. The arrest was the quietest, most difficult moment of James Miller's career. He drove to his uncle's house, not with sirens blaring, but with a silent, heavy dread. When Robert Miller opened the door, he just saw the look on his nephew's face and seemed to understand. There was no fight, no denial, just a quiet resignation as a 30-year Secret finally came crumbling down. The news ripped through the Miller family and sent a shockwave across Northwood. The monster they had feared for decades wasn't some stranger passing through. He was a neighbor, a friend, a brother, and an uncle. The journey to justice can be incredibly long, but science is lighting up paths that were once dark. If you believe in the power of technology to finally bring closure to families who have waited decades for answers, go ahead and hit that like button. And for more stories of cold cases solved and justice finally served, make sure you subscribe. Robert Miller was convicted of the 1996 murder of Sarah Jenkins and sentenced to life in prison. In the end, the very thing that had shielded him for so long, his unassuming place inside a large local family, became his undoing. The shared DNA that connected him to all his relatives was like an invisible shield in a world without genetic databases. But in this new era of science, that same invisible thread became the rope that pulled him out of the shadows. Justice, though delayed for 30 long years, was finally delivered for Sarah Jenkins. Her case is a powerful testament to the relentless march of science and the incredible hope of those who refuse to let a memory fade. It is a solemn reminder that no secret can be buried forever. Sometimes the path to the truth runs right through your own front door. In memory of Sarah Jenkins.
Blood on the grass won't wash away. Undetected footprints hidden in the mud.